Her blade was coated with poison to paralyze a human in seconds, but his blood was no longer human. The stars were scattered like tiny diamonds across the vast black canvas of space. Above Earth, a massive ship glided silently through the void. A ship so sleek, so precise that even the darkness seemed to bend around it. This wasn't just any vessel. It was the ship of the Zorathians, an alien race whose technology was years ahead of anything Earth could imagine. The Zorathians were infamous for their speed, their strength, and above all, their ability to wipe out entire species with surgical precision. Their weapons could decimate a human body with a single strike. Their fleets could overwhelm armies in seconds, and their intelligence was as razor-sharp as the blades they wielded. But they weren't here to invade Earth. Not exactly. The Zorathians had come to eliminate something much more unexpected, a thriving human resistance that had started to cause trouble. Kara, an elite Zorathian agent, stood at the helm of the ship, her mind focused and calculating. A towering figure, she was known across the galaxy for her unmatched combat prowess and ability to track down and eliminate threats with a chilling efficiency. Today, her mission was simple: capture or eliminate the humans who had been defying their superior race. These humans, however, had proven to be more resourceful than expected, more unpredictable than anything the Zorathians had encountered before, and that intrigued Kara. The ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, cloaked in invisibility as the Zorathians prepared to make their first strike. Kara's mission was clear, but she had no idea what was waiting for her. Earth was about to show her just how surprising and downright bizarre human resistance could be. Human resistance. The resistance was a strange blend of the most unlikely individuals. A ragtag group of 80s action movie buffs, rebellious tech geeks, and survivors who had no business being alive. They weren't soldiers, not in the traditional sense. They didn't have alien-grade technology, nor did they have the cold, efficient nature of Kara's people. What they had was something far more dangerous: human ingenuity, grit, and a sense of humor that would make any Zorathian agent rethink the definition of battle. Kara had expected to find a group of disorganized rebels with outdated weapons. Instead, she found a motley crew of misfits who, despite their quirky, unpolished exterior, were making the Zorathians sweat. They didn't fight with conventional methods. No, these humans fought with the most bizarre weapons imaginable. Duct tape? Check. Old baseball bats? You bet. Laser guns that looked like they were straight out of a 90s sci-fi movie? Of course. And it wasn't just their weapons that threw Kara off. It was the way they fought. Random, chaotic, and unpredictable. There was no strategy, no clean-cut military tactics, just humans throwing themselves at danger with a blend of reckless abandon and laughable bravado. And somehow that made them more dangerous than Kara could have anticipated. She quickly realized that defeating them wouldn't be as easy as her mission brief had suggested. The humans were a force of nature, powered by their strange sense of humor and their unexpected ways of thinking. Kara's plan was simple: locate the human base, neutralize their leaders, and end this resistance before it could gain any more ground. But the deeper she got into this strange world, the more she realized that simple was a word that had no place here. Earth wasn't just a battlefield. It was a stage for absurdity, and she was about to meet the person who would show her just how absurd it could get. Kara's first encounter with a human. Kara's mission led her straight into the heart of the human resistance, deep underground in a disused factory, where old, flickering arcade machines hummed and lights flickered overhead. It was here, amidst the dusty relics of 80s and 90s culture, that she encountered Jake. Jake was everything Kara didn't expect. A former soldier, sure, but now he spent his days watching cheesy action movies, playing vintage video games, and quoting lines from movies like Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. He looked like a man who had long since given up on life, until you noticed the gleam in his eye and the half grin on his face that told you he wasn't just a survivor. He was a problem. When Kara entered the hideout, the last thing she expected was to be greeted by someone who didn't even flinch. Jake, with his messy hair, worn-out t-shirt, and an ever-present smirk, was ready. The Zorathian agent was about to make her move when Jake casually glanced over his shoulder, muttered something about the Terminator being way overrated, and then turned to face her, ready for the fight of his life. "Well, well," Jake said, sizing her up as if she were just another character in one of his favorite movies. "You must be the bad guy. I gotta say, you look like you stepped out of a Lord of the Rings battle scene. What's with the blade? You going for the whole Witch King look, or are you just compensating for something?" Kara paused. She wasn't sure if she was more surprised by his insolence or the fact that he seemed to be taking this encounter like it was no big deal. Was he really mocking her in the middle of a fight for survival? Did humans have no fear? Jake grinned, clearly enjoying her discomfort. "Hey, if you're going to make an entrance like that, at least try to be a little more intimidating. Right now, you look like a bad cosplay at a sci-fi convention." Kara's eyes narrowed, her irritation growing. She wasn't used to this. Zorathians didn't get mocked. Zorathians didn't back down. And yet, here she was, facing a human who seemed more interested in cracking jokes than fighting for his life. But Jake wasn't joking. As Kara lunged at him, blade drawn, Jake's movements were unpredictable. He dodged, countered, and used everything around him. Old arcade machines, broken chairs, even a packet of popcorn, to avoid her attacks. Each time he landed a hit, he threw in a quick line. "That all you got? Come on, I've taken on worse. And they didn't even have cool alien weapons." Kara found herself momentarily stunned. She wasn't used to being outwitted, outpaced, or frankly outsmarted. And yet, here she was, in a battle she wasn't sure she could win. Not because she lacked skill, but because she hadn't anticipated the human factor. As they fought, a strange feeling washed over her. Maybe it wasn't just the weapons or the strategy that made humans so dangerous. Maybe it was the unrelenting, stubborn refusal to back down. The relentless humor. The absurdity. They didn't even seem to care if they were fighting an alien agent. They just wanted to win, no matter how ridiculous the battle got. And at that moment, Kara understood. Humans weren't just a threat to the Zorathians. They were unpredictable. And that, more than anything, made them dangerous. The real battle had just begun. The poison blade. Kara's first move was swift and decisive. Her blade, forged from Zorathian alloy and coated in a lethal poison, was designed to incapacitate a human in mere seconds. One slice, one drop, and the victim would be paralyzed. No strength, no movement, no resistance. The perfect weapon. At least, it should have been. With the precision of a seasoned assassin, she lunged at Jake, aiming for the soft spot just beneath his ribs. Her blade met air as Jake effortlessly sidestepped, a lazy grin playing across his face. "Is that all you got, lady?" he taunted. "I was hoping for something a little more dramatic. You know, maybe a grand speech, a bit of suspense." Before she could react, he leaned forward, poking at the shiny blade with his finger. "Is that supposed to make me into a human popsicle? 'Cause honestly, you're giving off more of a mildly annoyed villain vibe right now." Kara's brow furrowed in confusion. The poison, designed to paralyze human muscles, should have worked. It had worked countless times before. But Jake was still moving, still talking, still laughing. The moment stretched on, and Kara felt a ripple of panic begin to form. She watched as Jake took a few steps back, looking entirely unfazed. "You know," he continued with a smirk, "I've had worse hangovers than whatever that was." Her mind raced. She reached down, touching her blade, trying to process what had just happened. She tested the poison on countless species. Why wasn't it working? Her training kicked in, and she tried to analyze the situation. There had to be an explanation. "Wait a minute," Jake said, grinning. "You didn't factor in the human blood thing, huh? Yeah, we're kinda immune to all that fancy alien stuff. You can keep your poison. It's not gonna stick. I'm too stubborn for that nonsense." Kara froze. She was trained to deal with hundreds of different threats, races from all corners of the galaxy. But this This was something entirely new. She stared at Jake, a mixture of disbelief and frustration creeping into her thoughts. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Human quirkiness. As the confusion of the failed strike settled, Kara regrouped, analyzing the situation and preparing for a more direct approach. Her superior strength should have been enough to subdue him. But as the seconds ticked by, Kara began to feel something else, something that wasn't part of the plan: frustration. Jake wasn't just shrugging off her poison, he was laughing in her face, and that was to her an even greater threat. She lunged again, this time attempting to overpower him with a series of precise jabs and slashes. Jake, however, was a moving target, ducking and weaving with an agility that belied his scrappy, laid-back appearance. He was quick, too quick, and he didn't just dodge her strikes, he turned the fight into a chaotic comedy show. Kara's fist met the side of an old Pac-Man arcade machine with a resounding clang, and she narrowly avoided a flying quarter that came whizzing her way. Jake, still grinning, had somehow turned the arcade relic into an impromptu shield, using the game machine to block her strikes while tossing quarters like they were deadly shurikens. "Ah, classic arcade games," Jake remarked, his eyes lighting up. "Perfect for some old-school underdog combat, don't you think? You can't beat a human when we've got these kinds of resources." Kara staggered back as another quarter ricocheted off her armor. What kind of warrior uses a video game machine in a fight, she thought, trying to make sense of the situation. Jake, still clearly having the time of his life, continued, "You Zarathians really overestimate your fancy tech. I mean, we've got a few tricks up our sleeves too. Who needs an alien laser when you've got this?" He tossed a handful of quarters toward her with deadly accuracy. Her mind reeled. She was facing an enemy who wasn't just surviving, he was having fun. Kara's technological superiority, her laser precision, her weaponry, all of it was being countered by a human who couldn't care less about the rules of battle. Kara found herself on the defensive for the first time in a long while. Jake was relentless. With each exchange, he continued to crack jokes, mock her stance, and somehow managed to turn the fight into a slapstick routine. "You know, this is almost like one of those buddy cop movies," Jake quipped. "You're the serious one, and I'm the loose cannon. I get it." Kara's grip tightened on her blade. No matter how many blows she landed, Jake seemed to always have a response. His unpredictable tactics were a challenge in ways she never imagined. Kara's realization. As the battle dragged on, the strange sense of humor that Jake maintained began to gnaw at Kara's carefully constructed composure. The more she observed, the more she realized something disturbing. Jake wasn't just surviving against her. He was enjoying it. His easygoing demeanor and unshakable calm under pressure were like nothing Kara had ever encountered. Humans weren't supposed to be like this. She had fought countless enemies, each one predictable in their fear, their desperation, their need to survive. But Jake, he didn't just fight to stay alive. He fought for the fun of it. With each countermove, each quick-witted remark, Kara started to see the difference between this human and her previous opponents. There was something that couldn't be accounted for in any battle strategy or fight simulation. Something that didn't make sense. This human didn't break under pressure. Instead, he thrived in it. Jake, noticing her hesitation, leaned in with a mock-serious expression. "What, you're starting to doubt your perfect plan? Come on, don't tell me I'm actually impressing you. You know what they say, it's not the size of the blade, it's the size of the..." Kara's eyes narrowed, her mind spinning. This isn't just physical combat, it's a mental game too. Jake wasn't just reacting with his body. He was controlling the rhythm of the battle with his words, with his energy. And somehow that made him even more dangerous than his quips let on. Kara had underestimated humans. She'd assumed that their quirky, unrefined behavior would make them weak, easy targets. But she was beginning to see the truth. Humans didn't follow the rules of warfare, and that made them unpredictable. It made them dangerous. Unexpected ally. The standoff was broken by a sudden, terrifying roar, a sound that rattled the air, shaking the very foundations of the underground bunker. Kara and Jake both froze, looking towards the entrance of the old factory hideout. Before either could react, the ground trembled beneath them as an unfamiliar force stormed into the hideout. A group of rogue Zarathians, led by a towering figure who Kara recognized immediately. His armor gleamed like black ice and his weapons were designed for annihilation. He was an outlaw, one who had long since abandoned the Zarathian code in pursuit of his own twisted agenda. Jake didn't miss a beat. Well, looks like the plot's thickening, and I wasn't even expecting a boss fight yet. He turned to Kara. All right, princess, let's do this. I guess we've got bigger problems now, huh? Kara, though still wary of Jake's casual bravado, found herself nodding. This was no longer about her mission to defeat the human resistance. It was about surviving an unexpected, far greater threat. And she wasn't going to face it alone. I'll handle the heavy lifting, Kara said, her voice cool and calm, though a flicker of something, perhaps admiration, sparked in her eyes. Jake gave a half smile. And I'll handle the distractions. Let's make sure this doesn't turn into a sequel. You ready? As the two reluctantly formed an alliance, the stakes had never been higher. They had to face a force far more powerful than they ever anticipated. And while their methods, personalities, and motivations couldn't have been more different, they shared one thing in common now: survival. Together they would have to fight for Earth, and maybe even for each other, against a threat neither of them had prepared for. Kara's uneasy partnership with Jake was just beginning, and somehow it felt like the battle that shouldn't have happened had only just started. Kara had always known the Zarathian race was powerful, but nothing had prepared her for the shocking revelation that came next. The rogue faction, once loyal to their own code, was no longer concerned with keeping Earth safe or even neutralizing the human resistance. Instead, they had their sights set on something darker, conquering Earth and turning its humans into a massive, controllable army. The rogue Zarathians had come to believe that humanity's resilience and unpredictable nature could be harnessed and weaponized. They saw potential in the humans' immunity to their technology and poison, believing this could lead to an unstoppable force. The rogue faction wanted to test their theories and push human bodies beyond their natural limits, transforming them into soldiers loyal only to the Zarathians. Kara's stomach churned. These were her people, the same race she had been sworn to protect, and now they were using humans as nothing more than experimental subjects in a twisted effort to expand their power. This was a betrayal that she couldn't ignore. Kara was tasked with taking them down before they could complete their experiments and unleash hell on Earth. It was a mission that felt personal now. Jake, ever the pragmatic optimist, raised an eyebrow. Well, we've got ourselves a full-blown alien takeover on our hands now, huh? At least this isn't boring. Kara shot him a sharp look, but deep down, she knew he had a point. The stakes had changed, and the mission had grown more complex than either of them anticipated. She had no choice now but to work with Jake, despite her misgivings. Together, they would have to stop a rogue faction of her own kind and save the very species she'd come to understand and even respect. Pop culture disguises. The next phase of their plan was something neither of them had expected: infiltration. They needed to get close to the rogue Zarathians without being detected, and that meant blending in with the humans who were already under their radar. Kara's strategy? Go undercover as an average human. The only problem was, her knowledge of Earth's culture was based on second-hand accounts and her brief exposure to human movies. She had no idea what being an average human actually meant. Jake, of course, was quick to step in as the expert. Okay, so you need to watch some classic movies. I'm talking The Terminator, Die Hard, maybe a little Rambo. You know, the essential stuff. They won't know what hit them, Kara, ever the professional, threw herself into the task. She spent hours in front of old VHS tapes, watching scenes where Arnold Schwarzenegger flexed his muscles and fired big guns. As much as she hated to admit it, she was starting to understand the human fascination with action heroes, but she wasn't quite ready for the nuances of their language. When they finally entered the rogue Zorathian hideout, Kara tried to play her part. With a steely look, she approached one of the guards. "Hasta la vista, baby." Her words were clipped, confident, but completely wrong. The Zorathian guard blinked, clearly thrown off. What? What did you say?" Kara, utterly convinced her impersonation was flawless, didn't notice Jake's snicker beside her. He leaned over and whispered, "You know, you really should say it like, hasta la vista, baby. With the baby at the end, it's like the whole thing's a punchline." Kara shot him an annoyed glance. "I'm not sure I understand what's funny about it." "Oh, it's everything that's funny about it," Jake replied, barely able to keep a straight face. They continued, with Kara repeating more lines from the film, but each time her delivery was a mix of confusion and seriousness. She tried, "I'll be back," but it came out more like a demand than a catchphrase. Jake couldn't help but shake his head. "Look, Kara, you're not supposed to be a Terminator yourself, okay? Just act like a regular human who doesn't know how to fix a broken wife connection. You're doing way too much," Kara huffed. She wasn't accustomed to failing, and she wasn't accustomed to feeling out of place. But this bizarre pop culture crash course was making her realize that understanding humans wasn't as simple as mastering their weapons or technology. They were just different, and that difference was starting to be endearing. Humans strike back. Back at the resistance base, Kara and Jake realized they had to escalate their efforts. The rogue Zorathians had begun conducting experiments on captured humans, turning them into mindless drones, subjugated by alien technology. If they didn't act quickly, the entire human race could be lost. The resistance, led by Jake's old buddies, had managed to get their hands on a treasure trove of human-made technology, the very things the Zorathians had underestimated. Their secret weapon? A dusty Windows 95 computer. Jake, grinning ear to ear, led Kara through the operation. "All right, this old relic? It's the key. These Zorathian ships are like advanced pieces of art, until they're hit with something like this. Watch this." With a few quick keystrokes, Jake bypassed the Zorathian ship's defenses and gained access to their entire control system. Kara stood stunned, not believing her eyes. "This is an outdated operating system. How is this possible?" "Humans," Jake shrugged. "We like to keep things simple. Just look at it. A little bit of retro tech, a touch of ingenuity, and boom, those Zorathians don't know what hit them." Using the human-made computer, they infiltrated the rogue faction's entire fleet. In minutes, the once mighty Zorathian systems were offline, their ships grounded. The rogue faction was thrown into chaos, unable to respond to the human counterattack. Kara, who had spent her entire life believing that the Zorathians' technology was infallible, was floored. "You can't be serious. You've turned their own tech against them with a 30-year-old machine?" Jake laughed. "Told you, humans get creative when we need to." Alien incompetence. The Zorathians were falling apart. Their technologically superior systems, intended to crush the human resistance, had been outmaneuvered by a bunch of humans who hadn't even updated their operating systems in years. The irony wasn't lost on Kara. Desperation to regain control turned to one last weapon, one they believed would give them the upper hand: an army of cybernetically enhanced warriors, powered by advanced Zorathian tech. But instead of devastating the resistance, the warriors quickly fell victim to a barrage of improvised weapons. The humans had something the Zorathians didn't: the ability to think outside the box. In one of the most absurd moves Kara had ever witnessed, the humans turned a Game Boy into a makeshift explosive device, using the old handheld console as the trigger. Kara stood there watching the chaos unfold, as an entire Zorathian outpost crumbled under the force of human ingenuity. The rogue Zorathians were outwitted at every turn. She saw it clearly now. The humans' greatest asset was their improvisation. They're not just stubborn, Kara murmured, almost to herself. They're unpredictable, and that makes them far more dangerous than we thought. As explosions echoed in the distance and the rogue Zorathian forces scattered, Kara couldn't help but wonder, were the Zorathians truly superior after all? She had always believed in her race's technological supremacy, but it was the humans, so seemingly backward, who had turned the tide. The final realization hit her hard. Humans had found a way to win that no one had seen coming, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The war was spiraling out of control. What had started as a small, disorganized rebellion was rapidly transforming into a full-scale war, one that the Zorathians were beginning to lose. Each victory for the humans seemed to be more absurd than the last, leaving Kara more and more frustrated with every passing moment. It was almost as if the humans were playing a game, one they'd made up as they went along. Every time Kara thought she had them cornered, they slipped out with ridiculous tactics that made no logical sense but somehow worked. They weren't using fancy Zorathian technology or advanced weapons. Instead, they were relying on their own instincts, creativity, and the kind of chaos that Kara couldn't predict. Jake, ever the pragmatist, reveled in it. "You think you're ready for this, Kara? You're about to get hit with the greatest weapon Earth has. Total randomness." It was hard for Kara to argue with him. She had tried everything, from overwhelming firepower to sophisticated traps. But nothing seemed to work. The humans used everything from ancient booby traps to old-school misdirection. Banana peel traps, paint cans attached to strings, and that was just the beginning. One resistance fighter had even thrown an old toaster into the air, only for it to somehow knock out a Zorathian soldier from behind. She felt the weight of failure growing. Each time she failed, it wasn't just a personal blow. It was a blow to the Zorathian honor. She had been trained to defeat enemies quickly and efficiently, not to be outsmarted by something as absurd as a banana peel. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was a fight for her very belief in Zorathian superiority. Jake's leadership. Despite the mounting chaos, there was one thing Kara hadn't expected: Jake's rise as the leader of the human resistance. It started with small things: his unshakable resolve, his confidence in the face of overwhelming odds, and his ability to keep the morale of the troops high, even when it seemed like all was lost. It wasn't just his leadership that amazed her. It was his unbelievable ability to keep everyone laughing in the middle of what was essentially an intergalactic war. And then came the speech. Jake stood in front of the gathered resistance fighters, looking every bit the classic movie hero. He discarded his usual casual attire and donned an old leather jacket, one that probably hadn't been washed since the 80s. With the sun setting behind him, casting a red glow on his face, he raised a fist and began to speak. "You want to know how we win?" he began, his voice booming across the field. "We're not here to be heroes. We're here to survive. Just like every single action movie hero you've ever seen. And if you're wondering how we're going to do it, we're going to do it like Rambo, like Die Hard, like Schwarzenegger in his prime." The resistance fighters exchanged puzzled glances, and Kara, who had heard her fair share of Zorathian battle speeches, couldn't help but be bemused. Jake wasn't exactly inspiring the way a leader like General Corrin would. Instead, his speech was peppered with quotes and references from old action movies. Every other word was some obscure reference to a movie that no one, not even the humans, quite understood. "Listen, people," Jake continued, "I'm not saying we're going to blow up a building or defeat an alien overlord with a single bullet, but damn it, we're going to give it one hell of a shot." He paused for effect. "And if we die like Lethal Weapon, together. But we won't die because we're the good guys, and we have a super soaker and a Game Boy, and we're ready to kick some alien ass." Kara stood to the side, arms crossed, struggling to hold back a laugh. She couldn't tell if it was a joke or the most ridiculous motivational speech she had ever heard. But something about Jake's ridiculous passion did fire up the troops. His absurd speech didn't just motivate them, it entertained them, and that, in turn, ignited a fire in their bellies. Kara, not used to seeing anyone wielding humor as a weapon, was forced to respect the fact that Jake had somehow united an army with a speech that could have been written by a drunken screenwriter in the 80s. Final showdown. The final battle began at dawn. The rogue Zarathian faction had consolidated its forces, preparing for a full-out strike that would end the human resistance once and for all. Kara, standing at the front of the Zarathian ranks, felt a gnawing sense of dread. She had once been proud to fight for the Zarathian cause, but now she was beginning to question everything. Jake's troops, what remained of them, gathered in the ruins of an old shopping mall, armed with a mix of human-made gadgets, improvised weapons, and, in some cases, pure willpower. The rogue Zarathian forces, on the other hand, were equipped with high-tech weaponry and advanced armor. The humans' strategy was simple: use what they had. Kara's eyes widened as she watched the humans prepare. It wasn't advanced technology or overwhelming numbers that would win the day. It was the humans' sheer creativity. Kara found herself thrown into the chaos as the Zarathians clashed with the human forces. She faced off against her old comrades, struggling to reconcile the person she had once been with the alien forces she now opposed. Each strike felt like a betrayal, but she couldn't stop herself. She was fighting for Earth now, fighting beside the humans. Jake, meanwhile, was everywhere, leading from the front, directing the troops, and cracking jokes even while bullets whizzed past him. In the middle of the chaos, he waved a super soaker around like it was the most important weapon on the battlefield. "Don't worry, everyone," Jake shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "We've got a new weapon to deal with these aliens. I call it the human water cannon of doom." As absurd as it was, the sight of Jake charging into battle, wielding a squirt gun with all the seriousness of an action hero, rallied the troops. It was the perfect example of the humans' unpredictable nature. No rules, just survival. Victory through humor and persistence. The battle raged on, and just when it seemed like the humans were on the verge of losing, the Zarathian rogue leader made his move. He stormed the front lines, wielding a powerful futuristic weapon designed to cut through anything in its path. Kara faced off against the rogue leader, her old allegiance to the Zarathians warring with her newfound loyalty to the humans. But before she could make her move, Jake appeared from behind a pile of debris, wielding the ultimate weapon in his arsenal, a super soaker. "Hey, big guy," Jake shouted, tossing the water cannon at Kara's feet. "Let's see how you handle a little hydration." With a shrug, Kara grabbed the super soaker and aimed it at the rogue Zarathian leader. A few shots of water hit the leader, who was too focused on Kara to realize what was happening. In a bizarre twist of fate, the rogue leader lost his footing, slipping in the water and falling right into a vat of slime that had been left behind by one of the human traps. Kara's jaw dropped. She couldn't believe it. The rogue leader, with all his advanced technology and armor, had been defeated by a super soaker. Jake, ever the showman, grinned as the leader flailed helplessly in the slime. "Now that's what I call a real alien encounter." Kara couldn't help but laugh. For the first time since this battle began, she felt the pressure lift. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about surviving and living, and finding a way to laugh through it all. The humans had won, not through brute strength or advanced technology, but through humor, creativity, and the sheer determination to never back down. In that moment, Kara realized that Earth's greatest strength wasn't just its unpredictability, it was its spirit, and that spirit was unstoppable. Victory, but not without consequences. The dust was still settling as Kara stood at the edge of the ruined battlefield, her gaze sweeping over the destruction. Earth had won, but the cost was steep. The city was a shattered shell of its former self, scorched from explosions, wrecked by the chaos of the final fight. Buildings lay in ruins, streets cracked open, and the once bustling resistance base was now little more than a charred skeleton. The humans had triumphed against impossible odds, but the victory wasn't without its price. Kara could see the weariness etched into their faces, the exhaustion in their eyes. They had fought not just for survival, but for their very way of life. And though the battle had been won, the scars, physical and emotional, would remain for a long time. The Zorathians, after their crushing defeat, were retreating from Earth. Their ships ascended into the sky, their sleek forms disappearing into the atmosphere. They had come to conquer, to dominate, but instead they had been outwitted and overwhelmed by a species they had long underestimated. The rogue faction was broken, their plans in ruins, and Earth's resistance had proven that no force, no matter how advanced, could ever truly suppress the spirit of humanity. Kara felt a strange sense of closure, though it was bittersweet. She had once believed the Zorathians were the pinnacle of civilization. Their technology, their strength, their cold, calculated approach to everything, these had been the ideals she held dear. But now, standing among the survivors, watching the humans revel in their absurd victory, something had shifted within her. She hadn't just fought alongside the humans. She had come to respect them, their resilience, their relentless will to survive, and above all, their humor in the face of chaos had turned her worldview upside down. She had come to Earth with one mission, to defeat the human resistance. Now she realized that it was the humans who had defeated her not through strength or technology, but through something much deeper. Their spirit, their humor, their creativity, their absurdity. It had been their greatest weapon, and Kara found herself admiring them for it. She hadn't just been an observer in this battle. She had become part of it in a way she never expected, and in doing so, she had found herself questioning everything she once knew about her own people. Were the Zorathians really superior? Or was it the humans' unpredictability that made them the true force to be reckoned with? The thought lingered in her mind as she turned away from the remnants of the battle. Earth had won, but the war for her own beliefs had only just begun. Kara's new role. Weeks passed, and the dust settled over the battlefield. The humans began to rebuild, their spirit unbroken by the violence they had endured. As for Kara, she had found herself caught in an unexpected crossroads. Though she had once been a cold, calculated Zorathian agent, she no longer felt the same pull to her people's mission. After the defeat of the rogue Zorathians, Kara was offered a role, an unexpected one. The Zorathian leadership, intrigued by her shift in perspective, had extended an offer for her to return to their fold. They wanted her to help lead their forces in understanding humanity, to study the species they had once seen as primitive and insignificant. It was an offer that would have seemed ridiculous to her a few months ago. But now, after witnessing firsthand the chaos and brilliance of human ingenuity, Kara found herself at a crossroads. She wasn't sure if she could return to the Zorathian way of thinking. She had seen something in the humans that was different, something more powerful than the cold efficiency of her people. The Zorathians wanted her to teach them how to defeat humanity, but Kara wasn't so sure anymore. She had learned too much in her time on Earth. She had seen the humor in their chaos, the warmth in their stubbornness. The Zorathians, well, they had failed to understand what made humanity so unique. Kara could now see that the key to Earth's resilience wasn't in its military might or its technology. It was in its unpredictability. She had spent so long living by the rules of her people, their rigid structure, their precision, their cold logic. But now, after everything she had seen, she wasn't sure she could go back to that. The chaos of the humans, their humor, and their ability to fight with heart. It had wormed its way into her soul. She wasn't sure if she could leave that behind. Kara's new role, however, was not so simple. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was something more, a bridge between two worlds, a representative of a species she had once seen as beneath her. Her new mission wasn't to defeat humanity, it was to understand them. And maybe, just maybe, to find a way to bring the Zorathians and humans together in some way that didn't involve war. Jake's last word. As the Zorathian ships disappeared into the distance, Jake walked over to Kara, his usual smirk plastered on his face. He was still the same Jake, the irreverent, sarcastic, quick-witted survivor who had somehow become the leader of the human resistance. And yet something had changed between them. The banter that once seemed like an annoying distraction had turned into a strange, comforting routine. He stood beside her, looking up at the retreating ships. After a long pause, he turned to her with that same cocky grin. "Well, I guess this means no more intergalactic pizza delivery, huh?" Kara couldn't help but chuckle. It was such a human thing to say. So absurd, so simple, yet so deeply true. Jake had once been nothing more than a thorn in her side, but now, after everything they'd been through, she realized he was more than that. He had shown her what it meant to be human, not just to fight, but to laugh, to improvise, and to never give up. As they stood together, watching the last of the Zorathian fleet vanish into the sky, Kara felt something shift inside her. She had once believed that Earth's greatest strength was its technology, but now she knew the truth. It wasn't about the weapons or the machines. It was about the spirit of humanity, the way they fought, the way they loved, and the way they could find humor even in the most dire of situations. Her mission on Earth was over, but the journey of understanding, of truly seeing humans for who they were, was just beginning. And in that moment, Kara knew one thing for sure. She would never look at humanity the same way again. "Yeah," Kara said, smiling softly. "No more intergalactic pizza delivery." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's a shame, but hey, maybe you can find something more interesting to do now, huh?" Kara glanced at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Maybe I will. Maybe I will." And for the first time, she wasn't just thinking about the future. She was excited for it. Whatever came next, she knew one thing. She was ready to face it with the same humor, chaos, and spirit that the humans had shown her.